Ladies and gentlemen, I thank very much the organizers and sponsors for providing the opportunity for presenting my intervention at this online conference, Religion, Politics and Culture in the Papacy of Gregory XV LUDOVISI. I'm going to start with some hints of the historical background concerning the relocation of the Palatine Library of Heidelberg to Rome. At the time of Gregory XV's accession to the pontificate, Europe was experiencing the great conflict that broke out with the 30 Years' War, one of the longest and most destructive conflicts in European history. Begun in 1618 as a war between Protestant and Catholic states in the fragmented Holy Roman Empire, it progressively developed into a more general conflict, involving most of the great European powers. War increasingly had a religious connotation and fitted better into the continuation of the Franco-Habsburg rivalry for hegemony on the European scene. The conflict ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, which inaugurated a new international order. By the middle of the 16th century, the evangelical land churches had achieved a certain stability, externally through the religious peace of Augsburg of 1555. Aside from the common opposition to the Catholic Church which had been re-strengthened by the Council of Trent, Protestantism remained deeply divided and theologically split as well. Rudolf II, son of Maximilian II, Holy Roman Emperor from 1576 to 1612, was a partisan of the Counter-Reformation and a friend of the Jesuits. He was hostile to the Protestant cult in Austria, Bohemia, and Hungary. Even more fervent and energetic in the work of the Counter-Reformation was his cousin, Ferdinand of Styria, also a pupil of the Jesuits, who proceeded to eliminate the Protestants from his territories. Gregory XV was head of the Catholic Church and ruler of the Papal States from 9 February 1621 to his death in 1623, that is, in the first period of the 30 Years' War, the so-called Bohemian Palatine phase, 1618–1623. After all, Gregory XV interfered little in European politics, beyond assisting Ferdinand II, Holy Roman Emperor, and the Catholic League against the Protestants. Habsburg-Hungary, Austria and Moravia rose up against Rudolf, led by his brother Matthias of Habsburg, and forced him to give Matthias his power over these territories in 1608, to which he then had to grant freedom under the name of Matthias II. Since Rudolf was supported by Bohemians in this conflict, he was forced to issue, under their pressure, the Letters of Majesty, addressed to all the inhabitants of Bohemia. Also in Germany, a menacing tension had formed between Catholics and Protestants, which led in 1608 to the opposing formation of an evangelical union under Frederick V, Elector Palatine, and of a Catholic League headed by Maximilian of Bavaria, also a student of the Jesuits. Matthias II, who succeeded his brother Rudolf II in the empire, came into conflict with the Bohemians for the application of the Letter of Majesty, A revolt broke out in Prague and two royal ministers were thrown from the windows of the court castle, defenestration of Prague, and a new government was formed in 1618. On the death of Matthias II, he was succeeded on the imperial throne by the very Catholic Ferdinand of Styria, Ferdinand II, but the Bohemians did not recognize him and offered the royal crown to the Palatine Elector Frederick V. Thus began the War of the 30 Years, in its first period, called the Bohemian Palatine (1618–1623). Ferdinand II found himself in very critical conditions. The uprising had spread to Moravia, Austria, Hungary, which the Calvinist Gabor Bethlen, voivode of Transylvania, had taken over. Vienna itself was attacked twice, but Ferdinand vigorously faced the many dangers, obtained the conferral of the imperial crown, and induced the Protestant Union not to support Frederick as King of Bohemia, had the alliance of the Elector of Saxony, of the Catholic League, and Spain. Elector Palatinate Frederick V, the Winter King, would be an insignificant figure in the history of Europe, were it not for the terrific war that he helped to provoke. Frederick's conflict with Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II over the throne of Bohemia plunged Europe into 30 years of savage devastation and terrible privation during the first half of the 17th century. Frederick V showed himself inept and pusillanimous. The Bohemians suffered a great defeat at the White Mountain near Prague in 1620. Bohemia and hereditary states were completely subdued, and Protestantism was eradicated by violence. The Czech nobility was stripped of its possessions, which were given to foreign faithful servants of the Habsburg. The Evangelical Union dissolved. Frederick V was banned from the empire and expelled from the Palatinate. The Upper Palatinate was given to Duke Maximilian of Bavaria, with the Palatine electoral dignity in 1623. The nerve centers of the 30 Years' War, Bohemian Palatine faced crisis at that time were Bohemia and Valtellina. With the victory of the White Mountain near Prague on 8 November 1620, the Catholic League with the troops of Emperor Ferdinand II and the Duke of Bavaria Maximilian had defeated Frederick V of the Palatinate, who was crowned on 4 November 1619 as Frederick I of Bohemia, the so-called King of Winter. An opportunity to expand and ensure the majority of votes that the Catholic princes could dispose of was the ban of the Elector Frederick of Palatinate by the Emperor. This operation made available the territories of Frederick and above all the fifth electoral voice, which since the Middle Ages had been united with the Palatinate of the Rhine. It was the electoral Palatinate which called for a Protestant policy, which would not recede from joint activities or even military actions in response to the clear success of the Counter-Reformation. The more the confrontation between the Catholics and the Protestant escalated in the empire, the more the leadership of Protestantism in the empire got carried over to the Palatine electoral prince. The Palatinate became the spokesman for all Protestant grievances to the Reichstag and tried to enforce a weakening policy on the empire on confessional grounds. The elector was pushed towards far-reaching plans, and against all well-meant warnings, even to the acceptance of the Bohemian crown, underestimated a dangerous disproportion between the territorial power base and tense European politics. The fall of the Rhineland-Palatinate occurred unhindered after 1620. In fact, Frederick V accepted the Bohemian crown offered to him in August 1619 by the Prague rulers, who referred to their voting rights fixed in the Golden. During the pontificate of Gregory XV, the will of Rome was to ensure that the imperial crown remained in Catholic hands, and the Pope supported the line of the Habsburgs of Austria. For this purpose it was necessary to consolidate the power of that dynasty within the hereditary states and restore imperial authority. Karl IV's Golden Bull portrayed the electors as the bearers of the king's imperial power, as part of the king's body. The Heidelberg electors played a special role in the empire. The tradition provided them with a series of privileges which reflected the authoritative duties of the Palatine Count from Aachen. Thus, in the 13th century, the idea that the Palatine Count had the executive power over the king was put forth. But more important was the Palatine Count's claim to curacy, thus to represent the king when the king was not in Germany, and in time of throne vacancy. Of particular importance was the royal right to vote. The Holy See moved decisively so that the right of vote of the Palatinate for the emperor was conferred on a Catholic prince. This to prevent the balance from changing, 4 Catholics and 3 Protestants, within the imperial constituency. There were 2 names for the investiture: Count Palatine Wolfgang Wilhelm von Pfalz-Neuburg and Count Maximilian of Bavaria. Gregory XV preferred Maximilian I, occasionally called the Great, a member of the House of Wittelsbach, who formally obtained the electoral dignity on February 25, 1623, for the merits acquired in the fight against the Reformation and for the superiority of his political and military strength. In order for the Emperor Ferdinand II to decide in this sense, the extraordinary apostolic nuncio Fabrizio Verospi and the Capuchin friar Giacinto da Casale had been sent to assist the ordinary apostolic nuncio to the imperial court, Carlo Carafa. After the Battle of the White Mountain in 1620, Frederick V fled to the Netherlands. In January 1621, he was officially outlawed by Emperor Ferdinand. In April, the Protestant Union was dissolved. In summer 1621, Tilly, commander-in-chief to Maximilian von Bayern, occupied the Upper Palatinate. The Palatinate left of the Rhine was occupied by Spanish troops, but the elector's cause did not yet appear to be finally decided. On April 27, 1622, Tilly suffered a defeat by General von Mansfeld and the Margrave of Baden-Durlach in the Battle of Mingolsheim, fought near the German village of Wiesloch, 14 miles south of Heidelberg. The Winter King, Frederick V, wrote to Heidelberg councillors on October 15, 1621, to safeguard the archives and the library, especially the manuscripts. On November the 5th, the Heidelberg councillor made known that they had accomplished securing the archives, but that they hadn't yet been able to effect the same in regard to the library because of its size and the great number of books. In February 1622, Huguenot Henri de la Tour d'Auvergne offered to place the most precious works into safe keeping in Sedan, but this fact could not reverse the library's fate. From the opposing side, there had been endeavors on the part of Pope Gregory XV since December 1621. The Pope asked the Archbishop of Mainz, Johann von Schweikart, to attend to the safety of the Heidelberg book collections. Further attempts were made through the papal nuncio at the Spanish court of the Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia in Brussels, Giovanni Francesco Guidi di Bagno, as the Spanish commander-in-chief Spinola was operating in the Palatinate. It was the librarian Tenagel's suggestion that Emperor Ferdinand spoke to Spinola and asked him, in case Heidelberg were conquered, to put the library into safe hands. A similar request made to Delhi on October the 6th, 1622, to send him the library with all due deference, but the emperor remained unanswered. General von Mansfeld's troops and those of the Margrave Georg Friedrich of Baden-Durlach were able to unite. However, they separated again, and thus Tilly was able to defeat the men of Baden with superior forces at Wimpfen. He subsequently achieved a victory over Christian from Braunschweig, which sealed the fate of Palatinate's territories right of the Rhine. Heidelberg was conquered on September 15th. It was against this background that all the activities concerning the Bibliotheca Palatina took place. As a sign of gratitude, in 1623, the new elector decided to transfer the Palatine Library from the city of Heidelberg, captured by Jan Tserclaes, Count of Tilly, on September 16, 1622, to Rome, where it was merged with the Vatican Library. After inquiry by Cologne Nuncio Pietro Francesco Montorio and information by Cardinal Eitel Friedrich von Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen, on September 24, 1622, Maximilian agreed to officially donate the library as a proof of his most humble respect. For this purpose, on October 28, 1622, the Pontifical Commissioner Leone Lacci, Leo Laecius, the scriptor for Greek at the Vatican Library, a scholar of Greek origin and custodian of the Vatican Library, was sent to Heidelberg. As Cardinal Librarian, Scipione Cobelluzzi found himself, not by his own initiative but by the position he occupied, involved in the acquisition of the Palatine Library. When Leo Lacius, on 28 October 1622, left to receive in the Pope's name the magnificent gift from Maximilian I, Duke of Bavaria, he brought with him, among the various documents, an instruction by Cobelluzzi, drawn up by Alemanni, writer of the Vatican Library. Particular value was attached to keeping the library as complete as possible. Three things, it is said in the instructions by Cobelluzzi to Leo Lacius, had to be taken into account when sending the Heidelberg Court Library to Rome. To preserve the library in its entirety, bring it safely to Rome, and see if there are some special information or news about the manuscripts and books contained in the library in question. It was required to inquire precisely whether manuscripts are in the hands of private individuals, either through information from people who are familiar, or from remarks and writings which the librarians were accustomed to keep, or from receipts which those who received books for use issued, and which were then usually kept in their own bookcase. Also inquire whether books have been carried from this library to other places of the former Count Palatine or his ministers, and in this case then use all possible means to return them. Investigate whether the library has several doors and make sure that no one can enter. And since important and secret papers and writings were usually kept in certain small cupboards, every place and nook and cranny should be opened and searched. Above all, Alasius had to pay a particular attention to isolated writings, as bulls, papal briefs, privileges, and others, without neglecting even the slightest leaf of paper. Any references to owners and donors of books were not to be removed. These instructions show clearly that bibliophile experts were at work. The instructions have been drawn up with all the knowledge of an experienced, serious, and direct librarian who pursues his goal. That of the Cardinal Ludovisi, who combined with the same advantages the prudence and delicacy of a great statesman. Leo Alasius is presented with warm words the honor and importance of his assignment, and he is recommended to carry it out with all diligence and care. He is to go directly and quickly to the Duke in Munich, give him the papal brev, which he received together with a copy for his use, and according to its contents speak to him in the name of His Holiness of his mission. Before he left on October 23, 1622, Leo Alasius was instructed not only by the Cardinal Librarian Cobelluzzi but also very extensively by Pope Gregory XV's nephew, Cardinal Ludovico Ludovisi, who often went into much greater detail with regard to practical questions. Cardinal Ludovico Ludovisi also gave instructions concerning the route, transport, and the incurring costs. It was expected that the venture would meet with a lot of difficulties and dangers. Leo Alasius' assignment was to obtain that the Duke ordered Count Tilly and other ministers that the whole library could be handed over to him, and furthermore ask him for any help and assistance in order to get the library so quickly as possible from Heidelberg to Munich, or bring it to any safe place and then send it to Italy. Even soldiers on foot and on horseback, if the Duke deemed it necessary to be protected against hostile attacks by the a-Catholic Palatinate and neighbors, who will certainly not look with joyful eyes at dispatch of the library to Rome. One day after his arrival on November 26, Duke Maximilian granted Alasius an audience, at which he presented the Duke with a letter of thanks from the Pope, dated October 15, 1622. Only then did Maximilian realize the full extent of Gregory XV's wishes. At this point, it is interesting to quote the Bavarian librarian Leuker's mission to Heidelberg. Its mission thus proved to be by and large a failure. On October 14th he had written from Heidelberg and he had secured various manuscripts in Greek and Latin orders that could not be found in the princely library. At the castle he had also discovered various books that would be well suited for a Bavarian historical work. Over 100 books were transported to Munich, out of which only a few escaped Alasius' watchful eyes. It is also quite likely that some books went to Munich with his permission. In December 1622, Alasius had found the Heidelberg library largely unchanged, in spite of the difficulties that he experienced through the town. He kept on working assiduously. On 14th January 1623, Tilly received Alasius during a visit to Heidelberg, and Alasius informed him that his work was essentially completed. Alasius was granted permission to look through the books that were in the castle, and he remarked upon this collection with great satisfaction because of its high value. The largest part of the collection consisted of manuscripts in the German language. Then, in exchange of printed books, he took manuscripts from the Sapiens, another collection of books very important for the University of Heidelberg, and at last he took parts of the private Gruyter library with him. Alasius boasted of having brought back to Rome 3 libraries instead of the one he was sent out to get. The transportation started on 14th February 1623. Until that date, the books had been lowered from the gallery of the Heiliggeist Church, notwithstanding the resistance of the Heidelberg population. The books were packed in crates which were nailed up. 60 musketeers took the more or less 60 goods wagons with more than 8,000 volumes via Neckarsulm to Ellwangen. Difficulties arose when the Reichsstadt Nördlingen objected to foreign soldiers accompanying the transport, but finally they agreed to let them pass through the town. On 27 February, Alasius arrived in Munich. In Munich, the books were provided with ex libris, of which Maximilian had 8,800 printed. Some crates had to be replaced to enable them to be transported by mules. The books already in Munich were included. Alasius started his journey again on 26 April via Mittenwald to the Inn Valley. Because of turbulence of the Engadine Protestants, Alasius turned towards Graubünden, where he was stopped by snow for 11 days. On 25th May, he arrived at Colico, the northernmost municipality of the province of Lecco in Italy, overlooking Lake Como. In Italy, the journey was challenging because the custom collectors were not satisfied with the license produced. The transportation continued via Milan, Pavia, and Ferrara, and at last Alasius reached Bologna, a city situated in the papal territory. Alasius believed his freight to be safe and took the fastest route to Rome, which he reached on 28 June. He had to return to Florence, and the transport was delayed. In fact, because of the death of Pope Gregory XV, who died on 8 July 1623 at the age of 67, the payments for the transportation were not made on time. On 9 August, Alemanni, custodian of the Vatican Library, signed the acknowledgment of receipt for 184 crates containing the Palatine Library. In August 1623, 3,700 medieval manuscripts and 13,000 prints from Heidelberg entered a different world. After a period he had to defend himself from accusation of misappropriation and personal enrichment, Leo Lassius remained at the Vatican Library and started to catalogue the manuscripts he had brought. In 1661 he was made first custodian. Even though, contrary to Maximilian's wishes, the Palatine Library was not kept as a single unit, the former Heidelberg books have been preserved very much as an entity, which would never have been possible in Heidelberg. In all probability, the library would have been destroyed during the Orleans War, when the Heiliggeistkirche was also burned down. Upon arriving in their new home, the manuscripts and prints of the Bibliotheca Palatina were split up and sorted into the pre-existing categories of the Vatican collection. The Latin, Greek, German, and Hebrew manuscripts were, however, shelved separately and assigned special catalog codes. Thank you for your time and attention.